Hello, James Craig Wilson here. And I recently got into a bit of a debate. Well, some questions came up. I was speaking to a Bible study buddy of mine, and we were talking about approximately when certain bits of the Bible, the New Testament specifically, the first uh, few books Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Acts, and it came up in our discussion about when these books were probably written. Most of them at least 30, 40, as much as probably 50 years after the death of Christ. And I've I've I have I watch a lot of historical works, and many of them are secular studies like archaeological and studies of the rise and fall of civilizations. Of course, I do spend a lot of time reading biblical narratives like the gospel canon, and I like a lot of different versions. King James definitely is one of my favorite. I was raised with that, and I like that type of English. I'm pretty well versed in that. I also NIV, NASB, New American Standard, and the New International Versions, the New King James. I I like to read those. Perhaps as far as the New Testament goes, for me, the Greek interlinear. My mother gave me a wonderful book, Zondervan, and it has the King James and the NIV, and then on a facing page, Greek interlinear. If you're not familiar with that, I'm sure many of you are, but if just in case you're not, it's a wonderful work because it puts those three different versions of the New Testament parallel. Interlinear for the Greek part in particular, above the Greek, the actual Greek letters, words, is a transliteral transliteration. So each phrase or group of words will have the English. It's a very interesting read. It brings out a lot of things that, although I really do very much believe the King James is a fantastic, it was a fantastic endeavor, and we are blessed to have that, uh, all that work that went into making that our Christian Holy Bible. Many people I know, that is the Holy Bible. That is it. And however, when reading in the Greek interlinear, it does bring out an enhancement. There's a lot of words that are in the Greek that are not easily translated into English. Greek, for example, has in that language are many a lot of words for the Lord or Jesus or God. There's different words. We don't really have them. We can make them by adding them. Also, interestingly, love. There are about 7 different words for love. Agape, a godlike or selfless love. For example, the way I might translate agape love, the type of love that a mother would have for her child, would give her life for that child. That is a selfless agape love. There's eros, which is an erotic. There's philautia, which is kind of like a familiar family, brotherly love, if you will. There's many, many, and we don't have those. I understand that in the illusion or the Eskimo, their language, they have a lot of different words for snow. Of course, snow is important to them. So we have snow. You could say wet snow, fluffy snow, all kinds of different that. But the point being, the Greeks had a have a lot more words for love than we do. Just singular words, and they have amplified meaning that we have to add to. Anyway, going back to this, my comment was, and again, because I do a lot of studies. BC, okay, before Christ, okay, and then AD, and I'm going to come back to AD because this is where it was. But as I was talking to my Bible study buddy, I said common era just because I read a lot, and that is secular. I think it's anybody that uh, I would have guessed that anybody that reads AD and Common Era know that those are pretty much the same thing. And then BCE, which interestingly doesn't mean before Christ, etc., or whatever you might want to think, uh, before Common Era. So again, this is scientific, secular, whatever. Uh, but it's a way that in a lot of writings, a lot of the research, a lot of the documentaries that uh, I watch a lot. I watch almost all my free time I spend studying these kind of things. It's something that absolutely fascinates me, and I have infinite curiosity about the origins, uh, the rise and fall of civilizations, spiritualism, religion, and some of the most incredible, crazy this civilization. I just study that all the time. My friend, my Bible study buddy, took offense at this common era statement, which I was taken aback, quite honestly, because I didn't understand why. It's like it's AD, and I'm learning in conversation. Uh, Sometimes I have to be very careful, especially when we're we're jumping in where angels fear to tread. And what I mean about that is in people have their religious beliefs, and oh, be careful if you ever challenge something, even if you know what you know, or you can show that there are a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions for me when it comes to this. I see a lot of things in this common era, before common era, BC, AD. None of those bother me. I don't have a problem with it. I know what it means. And if somebody says common era, to me, it doesn't mean that I'm going to have to stop believing that there was a Jesus or any of that. It just is a way that they talk, or the way that someone I can talk to my agnostic or atheist friends. I, it doesn't challenge my faith. It it makes me wonder why how you cannot believe that there is a higher power. That's to me illogical. And I will say, I'm going to go a little bit about me, my religious and spiritual and historical views as I progress in some of these vlogs, I think they call this, but those things do not bother me. I It makes me question how they cannot believe that there is a higher power. That is odd to me because in everything I see, science to me and religion, spiritualism, that they walk hand in hand. The more I learn about the universe and our expanding knowledge of even the Big Bang theory and all all this stuff, the deeper we look into space, the more I am allowed to see of this incredible universe, from the greatest expanses of the universe to the smallest, microscopic, beyond microscopic. I see God. I see that in all things there is divine order. And I do not know what God is. I really don't think that it is possible for this little brain to begin to comprehend what God is. It's bigger than the universe. It is something that is very difficult. Tried to talk to somebody in my Sunday school class about there is no beginning, there is no end. I am the beginning, am the end. I likened it to the figure eight on its side, the symbol for infinity, that there's really no beginning and no end. And when I was young, we took a little strip of paper, okay, a little strip of paper, 18 inches long or whatever, and you laid it down on a piece on the table, and you took a little twist of the paper, put a little bit of glue, and you brought the two ends of the paper together, and it made like a figure eight, but there's a twist. Now you start drawing a line on the paper. Start with the top of whatever, just grab the paper and just start drawing a line and keep moving the paper, keep drawing the line and drawing the line. And eventually you come back to the line. And now here's what it is. This is a Mobius strip. You can look that up. That's a two-dimensional, but is it? It has no beginning, it has no end. It's a one-sided piece of paper. You can demonstrate that it is one-sided. It's very difficult, but anyway, I use that as kind of my way of saying that's kind of like the way God was saying, no, I am the beginning and I am the end. And it's difficult for me to comprehend all that. Also, just if you're exploring that, the three-dimensional of that, you take that into three dimensions. I'm not sure that it's even possible in real. You can do it on a computer graphic, but a Mobius strip expanded out to three dimensions is a Klein bottle, Klein, Klein bottle. Well, you can look that up. But I digress. Belief systems and challenging things like that. What is before Common Era and Common Era and BC and AD? Like, what's the difference? All right. The Gregorian calendar is the global standard for the measurement of dates. And despite originating in the Western Christian tradition, its use is spread throughout the world and now transcends religious, cultural, and linguistic boundaries. As most people are aware, the Gregorian calendar is based on the supposed birth date of Jesus Christ. Subsequent years count up from this event and are accompanied by either AD or CE, while preceding years count down from it and are accompanied by either BC or BCE. But what is the difference between AD and CE or BC and BCE? Do they mean the same thing? And if so, which should we use? I'm trying to give an overview, if we want to call them competing systems. To me, they're completely interchangeable, but I'm doing this to, I want to get back with my Bible study buddy and let him know due diligence. I don't want to argue about it. I want to enlighten. I'm not going to say you're right, I'm wrong. Maybe we're both wrong. Maybe we're both right. It's possible. Okay. Anyway, BC and AD, we'll start with that. The idea to count years from the birth of Jesus Christ was first proposed in the year 525 AD or CE, whichever you prefer, by Dionysius Exiguus. And this was a Christian monk, by the way. Note that this didn't happen until well over 500 years. We'll go AD, okay? And I still haven't defined what that means yet, okay? Anyway, this was standardized under the Julian and Gregorian calendars. The system spread throughout Europe and the Christian world during the centuries that followed. Okay, AD stands for Anno Domini, or Domini. And that is what? Latin, of course, for in the year of the Lord, or in the year of our Lord, in the year of the Lord. While BC, of course, stands for, as I mentioned, before Christ. Uh, so, an interesting side note about that is the actual birth date of Christ is debatable. And it's probably within 3 years of what, maybe a little bit more. Uh, that's a subject for later, but the actual birth date of Christ, that's a whole another can of worms right there. But the birth date of Christ was more likely maybe 3 years or more before what we now call Anno Domini. Okay. And let me know. I don't know how to pronounce Latin properly, but it's not a spoken Latin. Well, I guess it is. In some churches, they still do the Latin. Anyway, correct me or help me. Domini. I think that's the way. Anno, in the year of the Lord. So anyway, back to this BCE and CE. CE, as I stated earlier, is Common Era or Current Era, and BCE stands for Before the Common or Current Era. These abbreviations have a shorter history than BC and AD. Interestingly, they go back at least as far as the 1700s. I find it very interesting that nearly the better part of 2,000 years before the BC or BCE came about. But anyway, they've been in frequent use by Jewish academics for more than 100 years, but became more widespread in the later part of the 20th century, interestingly, in the latter part of the 20th century, replacing BC AD in a number of fields, notably science and academia. Okay. Now, why have some people adopted the BCE and CE? Well, an important reason for adopting before Common Era or Common Era or Current Era, it's religious neutrality, which to me is okay when I'm doing writing for a mixed audience. Uh, I don't always have to be preachy and show that. If I work with a lot of different kinds of people, and I'm okay with whatever gets my point across. But anyway, since the Gregorian calendar has superseded other calendars to become more or less the international standard, members of non-Christian groups may object explicitly Christian origins of BC and AD. Particularly problematic is AD, Anno Domini, in the year of the Lord, as we said. It's unavoidable that there is an implication that the Lord in question is Jesus Christ. I know that a lot of my Christian friends don't really care for a lot of other religions, and that again is a whole other can of worms that ugh, I have respect for. I don't. I say this, and I know a lot of my Christian friends. This drives them mad, or it angers them, or makes them question me about how I. But I say whatever gets you there. If Buddhism or being a Muslim or being a Catholic or being a Christian or a Presbyterian, or if you worship, I don't know, there's all kinds of things you can worship. It's all, my thing is simply this: coexist. That's important. If so long as whatever you do doesn't mess with me and my peeps, it's we all share this big blue ball here, and hopefully we grow out of all this war and all these terrible things. Religion and spiritualism, to me, it seems the root of, or at the heart of all of those should be simply this: to make the most of this beautiful planet and all these wonderful things that we've been given, stop killing each other. But let me get back to this. So it was religious neutrality that really brought that about. Religious neutrality was the main rationale behind, like, the Jewish academics' adoption of before Common Era over a century ago, and it continues to be its most widely cited justification. However, others object to the BC AD system on the basis that it is objectively inaccurate. It is widely accepted that the actual birth of Jesus occurred at least 2 years before what we call AD 1. And so some argue that explicitly linking years to an erroneous birth date for Jesus is arbitrary or even misleading. Before Common Era and Common Era, it embraces neutrality, and it avoids this inaccuracy since it does not explicitly refer to the birth of Jesus. So that's removing some of the baggage associated with our dating system, while also acknowledging that the starting point for 1 CE is essentially a convention. It's a convention, if you know what I mean with that. Now, has there been some pushback? Yeah, with almost anything that has anything to do with politics and religion, there's always going to be. That's why I'm taking time out of my regular studies to do this. So pushback. The movement between BCE and CE has not been universally accepted, and BC AD is still more widely used, even though the BCE and CE has been in the mainstream since the 1980s. Kind of a relatively new invention, right? There have been backlashes to the adoption of the new system in deference and in defense of BC and AD. Most notably, in 2002, when the UK national curriculum made the transition. In 2011, education authorities in Australia were forced to deny that such a change had been planned for national school textbooks amid a similar controversy triggered by media reports. Okay, we'll maybe get a chance to do a little bit more research about Australia. I don't know all of. I don't really have time to go much further in that, but obviously, passions are usually highest among those who see the adoption of a new system as an attempt to write Jesus Christ out of history. They argue that the entire Gregorian calendar is Christian in nature anyway, so why should we attempt to obscure that fact? Others ask why such a well-established and functional system should be replaced, arguing that the existence of two competing abbreviations is likely to cause confusion. I don't really see that it's that confusing. It's a simple to me, but some people are easily confused, I suppose. So again, that's why I'm taking a little time out to do this. It's also been argued that BCE and CE, those in fact are less religiously inclusive than BC and AD. According to some, BCE and CE elevates the importance of Christ's birth to the start of an entirely new common era, while BC/AD is a simple reference to the event. An interesting take on that. So, current status today, at least I'm going to try that. Current status and maybe some recommendations. I'll throw some of these out. Most style guides, like as a writer, we go by what's called style guides, and to that, obviously, any of you who do writing or have even had to do college things, um, like with the MLA, that's know your audience. Know your audience, and especially if you're writing for a newspaper or a magazine, they will have a standard uh, uh, way that you write things like that. So, to that point, current status and recommendations. Most style guides do not express a preference for one system or the other, although BC 80 that still is the most prevalent in most journalistic contexts. Um, I'll cite my source where I get some of this. Conversely, academic and scientific texts tend to use BCE and CE. Uh, and since there are compelling arguments for each system, and both are in regular use, I I couldn't recommend one over the other except for know your audience. If you're sitting in Sunday school class, my Bible study class, I'll try to remember to use AD and BC, and also enlighten those who think that AD means after death. No, it doesn't mean after death. That would not make sense because that would mean that probably it's a little complicated because we don't know exactly when Christ was born, but that would mean AD, there'd be a missing 30 odd years, okay? Because Christ was probably 33 years old when he was crucified. Well, anyway, so again, know your audience, whether or not you use AD, BC, CE, or BCE. Both systems regular use, but and given the choice, writers are free to apply their own preference. Um, Again, most importantly, know your audience. Uh, you probably pick a system and use it consistently, perhaps to avoid any confusion. There are, as a writer and type, okay, I've worked with newspapers and all that. So there are typographical conventions you have to consider as to when you're using this, your audience. So BC should appear after the numerical year, while AD should appear before it. We know that, right? So it's 1100 BC, but it's AD 1066. BCE and Common Era should both appear after the numerical year, okay? So 1100 BCE, 1066 CE. A little bit of a difference. Again, that's typographical stuff that you need to know if you're writing or using, speaking like I am here. As is the case with most initialisms, periods, abbreviations, periods may be used after each letter. It's not requisite, but 1100 B dot or B period C period, okay, or A period D period 1066, and same with BCE and CE. You do not have to, according to standard typographical conventions, you can just write AD, Anno Domini, and some guides recommend writing BC, AD, BCE, and CE in small caps. Typically, I see them written in standard caps. For me, typing, it's easier to just. It's not a real strict convention that you do it that way. So it's easier to type it without having to go to a different font or size. Of course, writers often don't need to make the choice at all. The BCE, CE, BCAD distinction is usually unnecessary outside of historical contexts, and it is generally understood that when unspecified, the year in question is CE or AD. If I say 2023 or 2023, I don't have to say AD. And as a result, dates that occurred within the last few centuries are rarely marked with AD or CE, whatever. For future reading, it is really an extension of this. I'm not going to go into all this right now, but when we are talking about this, of course, one wants to consider the Jewish calendar, which doesn't use an AD or okay, because the Jewish don't really acknowledge that Christian thing, that event. Their calendar is linear. There's no flipping it over. We didn't discuss this, but I would assume that most of you know that that point in time, Christ's birth, Anno Domini, right there. If you go that way, okay, to the BC or BCE, the numbers start at 1, 2, 3, 1,000. So they're going, the timeline is going backwards. So the further back in time you get, the larger the number. I know you know that. I know that most people already know that, but I have, for just to be, cover most of the bases here. So that goes back in time, and as it goes forward, of course, the year AD 1 or 1 AD, make sure I get that right, 1 AD, and then BC 200 or BCE 200. But anyway, finish this thought. The Jewish calendar, we're in like the year 5,423. I don't know what year it is in the Jewish calendar. I'll invite you to look that up, and maybe in a future chat, we can explore the Jewish calendar and how that works. It's fascinating, the way that it works. I have Jewish friends, and they almost, as to the best of my knowledge, we're all square that this is at the time of this recording, 2023. My name is James Craig Wilson, and I am exploring this wonderful, wild, crazy, fun world, fascinated with spiritualism, history, religion, rise and fall of civilizations, and people. People. Ah, I'm trying very, very hard to understand and learn to communicate better. And this little thing right here that I'm doing is an attempt to understand questions that people have, discussions that I have with people. I definitely invite you to, hey, jump in, throw something at me. I'd love to hear your opinions, your views, and enlightenments. I know I have some very, very well versed, very intelligent, very interesting people out there who share a lot of this. Thank you for listening again. My name is Craig Wilson. Blessed be